Let's talk about anxiety. I'd say about 5 years ago is when I first kind of got it. I used to have this idea of what anxiety was, right? So I used to think of it as like something based off of, let's say, anxiousness, right? It's like, when I was in a band, I was always getting this excitement before a show. So people are like, are you feeling nervous? I'm like, no, I'm just feeling anxious. Like, I just want to be out on stage kind of thing. So I associated it with like a good feeling of like an anticipation of excitement and everything like that. Basically in 2015, when I was at work, I was working at Visions Electronics here in Canada in Edmonton, and I just suddenly out of nowhere just kind of had this feeling, and I didn't understand it. I was just like feeling cold and hot. I was like, oh my God, is something wrong with me? And then it was creating this panic, and I was thinking, oh my God, okay, I'm starting to breathe a little weird. And then you start thinking about the breathing, and then you're like, oh my God, I can't breathe. You're hyperventilating. Next thing you know, you're on the verge of what is actually known as a panic attack, not even knowing what exactly that is, despite the fact that you've seen other people go through it and that you've kind of read up on it and looked up on that sort of thing yourself. But the reality is that can kind of spur up at any moment. Like, it can kind of hit you. Some people have dealt with it their whole lives. For me, I've just kind of had it hit me about 5 years ago, and I just didn't understand it and didn't know how to deal with it. I talked to so many people about it, and the majority of people at the time didn't understand it either. Like, they didn't understand how to help me or what to say or what to do. And there was a few people in particular that were able to kind of guide me through the process, right? Fast forward 5 years later, I am living and dealing with it, but I guess I just wanted to kind of point out and give the understanding of what that sort of anxiety is. There are many different types of anxiety. My anxiety is working in conjunction with my ADHD, so it's kind of a mix, right? Like, my ADHD, I don't have a problem with it. I like it. I like being hyperactive. I like being all over the place, and I can keep my thoughts together really well anyway. I'm very organized in my head that way. But when it comes to the actual feeling of anxiety and what that is, it's taken me a long time to be able to get used to living with it and used to dealing with it in particular different situations. So at first, when I started going back to work, I would just be in these predicaments where, I'm on a sales floor, I'm trying to sell basically electronics to people, right? So commission-based, everything like that. And I would get in the middle of a sale, and what would happen this anxiety would kind of come up out of nowhere if, let's say, I felt overwhelmed slightly, or there was something that I didn't want to deal with, right? Not having a good day, and it was just a combination of things. Whenever I was standing there, I felt like I always had to move, right? Like a hockey player at the national anthem, kind of moving their skates and keeping themselves going. I had to kind of move around, and I've always felt like I needed to lean on something, right? Just kind of basically outlining my perspective from it. I had to try to understand each small part of that. It was very scary though, because I didn't understand how to deal with it. I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm not gonna be me. I'm just gonna be this person who's just worried about panic and worried about breathing and worried about the situations that I'm in at any particular moment, and there's nothing that can be done. I even kind of went to the doctor, and the doctor gave me some antidepressants, right? And these antidepressants were geared towards a higher, I might be confusing the two, but it was the ones they gave me were for a higher level of serotonin, which in reality, because of my ADHD, which I had not been said to have yet, because of that, I actually had way too much serotonin. So after 2 weeks of taking that, the anxiety was just worse. I was like, okay, I'm not taking this shit anymore, right? Come to find later on, when I'm dealing with a psychiatrist, he had told me I had the ADHD in conjunction with the anxiety, and that the anxiety was more of a lack of the dopamine. So I had tried these different pills, which you didn't have to rely on, you didn't have to ease off of, it didn't make you feel shitty, it didn't have a lot of those chemical compounds in it that a lot of people tend to take and kind of feel shittier and not themselves anymore, right? Where it just turns them into a zombie and turns them changes different aspects of their life. Like, this was something I tried for a couple months, and then as I kind of did that, I was able to ease off of it because I grew this understanding through breathing techniques and meditation and stuff like that, but also learning from other people, learning from firsthand experience, everything like that. I just basically grew this level of understanding on how to deal with it myself, because it's really tough. It's really just tough to talk about that part of mental health with people, and especially when they don't have an open mind and they don't want to understand it. Or it's not even like that they don't want to understand it, but that they don't even know how to try, right? Like, just to have that feeling, for example, like driving, you know, so there have been a few different times, of course, with anxiety would flare up driving. Let's say, like, oh my God, I'm late for something, or there's something in my mind already, traffic is bad, and just for whatever reason, like sometimes no reason at all, it just seems to kind of flare up. So then all of a sudden, this like sense of like dizziness, it's almost like a weird hallucination when it gets really deep into it. You get a little bit of this dizziness, this feeling of like, oh my God, everything is moving around me. Oh my God, what do I do? And then you tense up, and then what it is basically being in control of your mind and not having your mind be in control of you, right? And it's a lot harder to work from that angle when you got the anxiety, and especially combined with depression if you have that. But with the anxiety from the ground up, when you have to work on that, you're basically forced to deal with it right in that scenario at that time. And it's like, well, what's the answer? What do I do? And the biggest key point, like major point number one, is to learn how to control your mind. And one easy way, not easy, and one particular way of doing that is to just ease yourself by focusing on your breathing, right? Just understand that what is happening around you is not actually happening the way that your mind thinks that it's happening, right? Once you get that down to a fundamental level of understanding, then it all becomes a lot more clearer in how to deal with it, right? So when the anxiety takes you over, you put yourself in the point where you're in the driver's seat and you're kind of sitting there focusing on something. So some people like to do something where they focus on a specific thing, right? Like, let's say wherever you're sitting, you focus on an object in the room, or if you're driving on the road, you like look at a street sign, right? And just stare at that street sign for a second, right? Just allow your mind to now be allocated to thinking about your breathing and whether how your breathing is, whether you're going, you know, you're inhaling, you're exhaling, just to focus on that as like the starting point. Focus on that and try to ease yourself off of the false reality you're giving yourself of what is kind of closing in around you, right? Like, the biggest fear for me was definitely getting dizzy, right? Because getting dizzy meant, oh my God, panic. I didn't know what to do. And at first, the only thing I knew how to do before I was able to try to learn how to control that with my mind was basically go to the bathroom, splash a bunch of cold water on my face. Sometimes I even have to, like, wherever I am, even if I was at work, I would just go outside in my shirt, run outside through the snow. Like, I would just run out and just start running, get my heart rate up, start sweat a little bit, like anything that was going to change the gear of my mind from where it was, and to think that I wasn't going to die, because it literally feels like you're almost going to die or you're going to fucking pass out. And it's a very scary thing, right? Especially when you're in a bad place mentally and you're getting that stuff all of the time. That is not a good place to be in, quite obviously, very evidently there. Just being in those scenarios is very scary, or just having that, just not knowing what to do. Just almost like a lot of fear that takes over you, right? But when you're in control of your mind and you know how to ease into it with those breathing techniques or whatever it is that that somebody might use to refocus, you start to kind of get a better understanding, right? It's just better to let go and accept what you have. It's like, okay, this is what's happened. I can't go back from it. I have to deal with it. I have to do with what I can do, what I can with it. Just allow it to be a part of your life. But also know that, you know, you can just breathe easy. It's not always going to be easy. But just to let yourself stay calm and just flow out all of that energy. Put yourself in a good headspace where you're allowing yourself to be free from the outcome of anything, right? Some sort of a key to that is to just do your best to stay present to the moment, right? On a grander level, right? At the time, you know, when this is first happening to you, you want to focus on the breathing and those small micro aspects. But on the macro, you want to focus on how you are as a person. Like, what is it in everyday, day-to-day life that is giving you this anxiety? Is it the overthinking when you're sleeping? Is it something that's going on at work, something that's going on at home? Like, what is it that's overtaking your ability to have the control of your mind? Essentially, once you have control of your mind, in terms of gearing that anxiety towards a level of acceptance where you can kind of just, okay, this is the process that's happening. I'm getting that feeling, the same similar feeling that I've had numerous times before. I don't want to have this go on to the verge of panic. So if something seems off, you know what I mean, and you feel the need to combat against it, like, oh my God, and let that fear in, then of course that's going to overtake you and push you to a point of panic even quicker than you would have even been pushed before. Instead of that, just be like, you know what? Everything's fucked up around me. It's very dizzy. I'm starting to feel uneasy. I'm very tense in my body. Nothing is flowing out right in my mind. My mind starts looping. I start worrying about my breathing. I start worrying about what's happening to me in my mind and my body. Instead of having all of that worry, it's just better to kind of take it for what it is, bring it in and be like, you know what? Yeah, all that stuff is happening right now, but I know that that is my own false reality of what's going on, right? As soon as I have that understood in my head, I'm just like, okay, I'm going to focus, just drop all this shit, and I'm going to let the anxiety take me. Just let it take me. I'm like, okay, bring it on, motherfucker. Just bring on the noise, you know? That's all you can really do in that situation when it's right in that moment and everything like that. But if you've brought in your life to surrounding yourself with an ecosystem of happier things and of better things that are going to make you more fulfilled, that sense of depletion tends to dissipate, you know? You don't have all of those anxiety triggers as easily. Even some of the food you eat, you know? If you're eating something crappy that's going to make you feel bad, then in theory, your anxiety is more likely to be triggered from that. So if you conquer every aspect of your life that you feel you've lost control of, or that could be hindering you in a negative sense, you can kind of bridge that gap by taking a slow path, you know, baby steps, one thing at a time, conquering each individual thing as best as you can, to the point where any sort of flare up of that anxiety that's going to take place is just something that's accepted, to being like, okay, you know what, I'm not going to be embarrassed, I'm not going to hide over this. This is what's happening right now. I'm going to allow myself to kind of just flow. Okay, you know, like the world is closing in around me. I feel like I need to lean on something. I'm getting a little, you know, my equilibrium is a little off. Different things are being triggered. But instead, I'm like, okay, I just ease right into that breathing, right into that focus on something else. Another good thing to do that I would do is like strike up a conversation with a friend of mine, right? Just get lost in that conversation, right? Like something that is completely polar opposite of that. Like someone talking about, oh, some video game that they're playing, or, you know, that they went skiing in the mountains that day. Just anything that's going to take your mind away from that. Like, believe it or not, like me going on my phone and just jumping into some sort of a quick game of hearts, or just opening up messages and messaging my girlfriend or close friends of mine, just being honest about it. You can just kind of confront it right up front and center, But the best thing to do is to just go a different path in just focusing on something else that's taking you outside of that spectrum of where you are, right? Put yourself in a different zone, right? Put yourself in command of changing the zone that you feel that you're being stuck in. So then what that allows, it kind of opens up this new thought process where you're like, wait a minute, like for those 3 minutes after the anxiety, I was sitting here talking about video games with my friend, and then after that, the anxiety still felt like it was there, and instead of me allowing it to flare up, I was just like, wait, okay, all of that flare up and stuff was just all in my head. This is all stuff that I've kind of been bringing on through the anxiety, through the cards that I've been dealt. So there is a gap there. So there is a way to move myself from being stuck within that rut of anxiety. There is a way for me to be out of that zone. And that sheds some really good light. You know, that's a good benchmark to leave at first, and seeing that light at the end of the tunnel, and just being able to separate yourself from the reality or the false reality of the situation that you're in, and presenting yourself with a new opportunity to be calm and with a new understanding of how to deal with it. And of course, it's not going to be easy all the time, and rarely ever is. You're going to be dealing with this a lot, but isn't it better just to make it a simpler and much smoother process than it is to make it so elaborate and scary? Yeah, so when I just eased into all of that, I realized that once I had the control over the anxiety, it's not that the anxiety would go away. Like, it would flare up and stuff, and usually during negative thought loops or in positions where I wasn't on top of keeping my head straight that day, if I was feeling off or anything like that. But then I always remember to keep myself in first gear, right? And not let my mind make that shift, and have that control over my mind to be like, yeah, everything is okay, everything is calm, everything is going to be good. And then, you know what? It goes away, and I find it tends to go away a lot quicker, and be a lot less lengthy in time of when it comes to the panic, when you get used to that new habit, right? Humans are habitual. We're the habit of our own environment, and whatever you bring in and create as that habit is going to be what it is. So if it's something negative that you have that you're holding on to, that's going to be your process. That's going to be your new habitual process. But if you start to gear yourself towards being more positive in handling the scenario, it starts to become a lot more habitually positive, right? So then you start to dive into what it is that's making you feel that way, and what triggers your anxiety to you as a person, because it's different for everybody and with what disorder they have. But once you're able to understand it and be in control of it, then it'll put you more at ease than it would otherwise. You'll find that the anxiety might be a little bit less, it might be a little bit less intense at times, or you'd be able to control that relatively quickly in a matter of minutes. And the chance for a panic attack to occur would be a lot more few and far between. So I just think it's good to stay focused on that. Put yourself in a positive, keep yourself in that realistic yet positive mindset, but to the point where you're not going to be caught up in a negative thought loop and in bad habits that you may tend to be doing or taking part in on a daily or weekly basis, right? So I just suggest that you discover what it is that is keeping you down in the other areas of your life, to diminish the amount of anxiety that you will feel when you do feel it, and to conquer that and slowly take the progress to turn that into something that's a lot more relaxing. that's a lot more you. That's a lot more at ease and within the realm of who you are. So I guess that's my rant on the anxiety. I'll definitely touch more on this, but I just want everyone to, I just want people to feel better. I want people to. I understand everyone has to deal with these things, but there are ways to curb them and diminish the amount of suffering that you can have through these panicky times, and with the suffering through different levels of anxiety, whether it's severe or otherwise. And if this did something for you, then I'm glad, and if not, well, it works for me. So people have to do what works for them. And yeah, thank you for listening. And stay real, and I'll stay caveman.